Share the presentation of this, right? On this, okay.
Who do they send it to? Like finance has got a PowerPoint they want to share.
They have to share it.
Can you give me your email address? They can send it to you.
ccallahan@starterschools.org. Yeah. That's
Well, but that's, I don't think so.
I think that's what we're gonna have to do. I think we're gonna end up having to plug whoever's presenting their computer. From here. Take that cord, plug it in.
Jen Day is saying the whole thing probably needs to be rebooted, but nobody in IT has access to the closet.
They can't do it from the car.
I think what's gonna happen is if you're presenting something, you're gonna have to take this out, plug it into the computer you're presenting. All it's gonna do is put that on. Zoom will still run here.
Yeah.
It's not gonna disconnect Zoom, so Zoom will still be capturing any of that information, like the person speaking at least, but the
So
presentation
if she
itself.
wants to, she'll just come in, plug in, and then she'll give her presentation. Do you have a board for her to plug into? It'll just be this one.
Be this one.
Gonna unplug this.
That's the
Okay.
one feed into the wall.
So then the people in the Zoom will not be able to see it,
They would be able to hear the person speaking here.
but you won't be able to see the presentation.
I mean, we'll have to put it in the Google Drive and post it on.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, we should probably just let her know that she can just come in and,
Finance
Plug it in.
just sent your.
well, the thing is that if I pull this down, everybody's gonna see that. If she's better off to come up here and plug it in. She's better off to come plug it in.
Good evening, everybody. We apologize. We had some technical difficulties, as you could see. This isn't our equipment, so we think we've sort of got a workaround. So good evening. Thanks for coming. We're a little bit behind schedule, so the first order of business will be to call it order. Just did that. Let's do the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item, I distributed them, was the minutes for our last meeting. Hopefully everybody should chance to see them. If anybody have any minutes. Motion to second, all those in favor? It passes, okay. So I think the next thing on our agenda was the finance committee did get the reports from Harriman, and they do have a presentation for us tonight. We've gone through and analyzed the information and put together a PowerPoint, which Charles should have, maybe.
If I take this.
Great job, Julie.
I click the button.
Vanessa and Dave, the tag team tonight for your presentation. Thank you.
Next slide.
Okay, why don't you go right ahead and work it right from there?
Okay, then I can see and I can stand behind.
All right.
And that way it'll pick up your voice.
Okay, cool. So, do I just page down to? to download.
See if we can open it up from here. Is this fine?
Yep, that's good. All right, hopefully everyone can see that. All right, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So we do have a quick update to share. We were able to get most of what was open, but there are still some open questions that Shannon is tracking down from Harriman. But most importantly, we were able to get the detailed cost projections from Harriman at a fairly granular level, kind of by category. And then Dave was able to take that and compare it to a cost database for a recent school that was designed by Harriman. So this is just a quick recap from our readout on the 22nd, just to reground everyone. I think everyone's aware that the 4 schools model was significantly higher from a cost perspective, from a cost per square foot, cost per student, and square footage perspective. We had a number of questions on the numbers, including, an ask for the detailed construction costs and explanations for what was driving some of these differences, as well as differences in the renovation scenario between the 4 schools and the cost per square foot for those schools, the middle school construction costs and some of the staffing assumptions. So we did get some answers on the staffing piece. So this is just to reground. I shared a version of this previously, but you can see that the staffing costs in the 4 school model are considerably higher, nearly 20% up versus the unified school. The biggest drivers are really in the ones that are highlighted there. So the instructional professionals, the ed techs, and the principals. I think the principal piece is self-explanatory. When you have multiple schools, you obviously have multiple principals. The piece that didn't make as much sense to us as a group was the instructional professionals and ed techs. We did confirm that the enrollment numbers used in both scenarios were the same. So the delta here is really driven by assumed inefficiencies. So inherently with the 4 schools model, you can't guarantee that the enrollment will be split up proportionally across the 4 schools. So you can do your best to sort of redistrict, but the actual enrollment figures year by year may not be exactly spread out proportionally. So what that might mean, and an example is, let's say for kindergarten, the recommended classroom size is 20 students. Just based on the enrollment numbers, you may have a classroom of 12 students in each of the 4 schools because you don't have enough to make, a 20 student classroom. In a unified model, you'd be able to consolidate and have fewer classrooms and therefore fewer instructional professionals and ed techs. So that was the kind of explanation that we got from Harriman. We haven't gone beyond that. I would say this will be fleshed out in the next phase as we kind of dig into the scenarios that the committee has sort of approved to move forward in investigating, and total operating costs for each of those scenarios would need to be developed, not just for staffing, but for all costs, including, things like utilities and any other operating costs. So kind of what's remaining for open questions. These are the key open questions that we've called out as really needing responses to. The first is again around the square footage per student and why it's so much higher in the 4 schools model, to the tune of about a third higher. So that we're still tracking down from Harriman. Shannon is working actively with them to get answers to these questions. The second is around the middle school renovation costs, because there is a substantial difference between the 4 schools model and unified. On staffing, this one is a little bit more, I would say, minor, but there is 1 fewer assistant principal in the 4 schools model, which just seemed to kind of a little bit be opposed to kind of the assumption around the principal. So we just wanted to understand that. And then lastly, for us to kind of opine on renovation costs, we really need to understand how Harriman sort of developed those costs between the 4 schools, and why, like, for example, Pleasant Hill and 8 Corners are so much higher than, say, Blue Point. So just understanding that a bit more. So from here, I'm going to hand it over to Dave to kind of go through the more detailed cost comparison on the unified school model. You just like page down.
Okay. Hello, Dave. So I guess I'll preface this by saying we worked really hard trying to get the accurate data with backup from Harriman to really try to understand their scope of work, their assumptions, basic approach that they took to this number that they put in the referendum. Sourcing the cost comparison, which we'll show shortly. I work for a general contractor in pre-construction, and we're building the Harriman School right now up in Rumford. So essentially what I ended up doing was the detailed estimate that our subcommittee received was it was like an early iteration of costs. So it was essentially lower than what was actually in the business case. So there's some more work that we potentially have to do there. Essentially what it was, they came back from the new construction was $105 million. So the 160 was going to be, I mean, there's going to be contingencies included. There's going to be owner, school district soft costs, trying to understand those. We still have some outstanding questions, but for our purpose, we thought it was best to arrive at an accurate starting point from a cost per square foot, strictly from a new build perspective. So essentially, yeah, what I guess we're trying to say is the process that we took was taking direct cost of work only. So I'll just skip ahead here. Cost per student. This is one of the slides we put together, but you can see this. Yeah. Okay. So essentially, in construction, there's what we call CSI divisions. So this is how you define scopes of work and trades. So like 4 is masonry, 5 is steel. Your finishes are going to be all your framing, your flooring, your painting, your ceilings, all that kind of stuff, so on and so forth. So what you see here on the left is based on the estimate that we've received so far was the cost breakout by CSI division from that estimate, which was provided by a PCM Group. They're a third-party estimating company that I've worked with in the past. Very reputable, pretty good. And then what you're seeing here is a school that we're currently building up in Mexico, and we thought it was important to just try to look at cost per student, because I know we mentioned that, and then we'll get to cost per square foot, which we can talk about further. So cost per square foot, running through the detailed estimate, I mean, it was fairly detailed. I think I don't know if it's up there yet, but we will get that on the Google Drive for anyone to reference. But essentially, what we're looking at here, this is the true cost per square foot. And going through here and just trying to understand their approach and what we see in the market, a couple of things stood out at me. So as far as like us agreeing with their estimate, I think they're there for a good portion of it. A couple items that stick out at me would be Division 5 here was steel. So just based on their estimate, they, in my opinion, from a cost per square foot or from a pounds per square foot is like conceptually how you look at it, and then you convert it to tons of structural steel. That's just how you kind of approach it at this point in design. I think they assumed 10 and I think they assumed 12 pounds per square foot, and then their overall unit cost was not quite there. Just fun fact, like steel contractors right now, like they hold their numbers for 3 days. So it's like, it's so hit and miss as far as variability, but that seemed pretty stout to me, that number. I think that we could probably reel that in. And this would just be your cheapest option of superstructure, like everything above the ground and up is really going to be a structural steel columns and beams, bar joists, and metal decking. That's the most cost effective way to do it. They did approach it that way in the Harriman estimate. Just not sure on their quantities and unit cost assumptions. Division 6. So this is all of like your millwork items, carpentry, finished carpentry, rough carpentry. A couple items that stuck out here. Their rough carpentry item for roof blocking obviously there's no details, so you're not really, it's hard to assume what it is, but just based on strictly like from a perimeter standpoint, where you're gonna have a bunch of wood blocking that the metal like coping. Have you ever seen like a parapet on a roof? It's like metal coping and everything that goes around it. Like you have to hammer that into something. So, but it can get pretty pricey just based on whatever the details are shown. In my opinion, they were actually light on that. Like I think they should have had more money in there for that. Just my opinion, but overall, like the millwork package that they included was certainly on the higher end. And I guess what I'm trying to say is like there's definitely opportunities for us, for the design team, future design team, et cetera, to like reel that number in. And yeah, it's just kind of like the Cadillac system for millwork as far as that goes.
Can I ask a question
Mhm.
about some of this? Is any of this driven by like regional comps, by the regional labor market, where you're talking about a couple of places that are in a different section of the state that might have a different market than we do?
Certainly, yeah. So PCM, again, don't ever ask an architect. There's no architects here. Don't ever ask an architect about pricing, because more times than not, they definitely underestimate their designs. But PCM company is who they subcontracted with to develop their conceptual pricing on this. Them as a company, they're plugged into the market. They do their due diligence with regards to how they approach pricing for sure. And then even like, depending on like most subcontractors, aside from any folks, like out of state, are willing to go pretty much, all over the state of Maine. So no, I think I trust their unit cost. I don't think there's going to be much savings, like finding a local. First of all, you got to find someone that's like has the financials and that can take on the work and actually, meet a schedule. But yeah, these are all informed with market.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's see. Finishes. I guess the other big one that stood out to me was so furnishings and equipment. And then this can swing very much. So equipment is going to be like anything from athletic equipment, exterior outdoor playground equipment, stage, rigging, food service equipment. It can vary so much. The way that Harriman approached this was they had a $750,000 allowance for kitchen equipment. I don't disagree with that, just because you can see it just depending on the use of the kitchen and just strictly branding, like it can get out of control. So like 750
storage
for sure.
Place for food.
It adds up quickly. So I think like a lot of it's like in my past working on schools, not in particular in this state, but elsewhere in the country, like they're moving to a lot of municipalities are moving to like instructional kitchens, making that part. It's not just like a cafeteria type thing. Like they're actually utilizing it for teaching, et cetera. I don't know if that was their intent with this, but anyways, that stuck out at me. And I guess just one caveat too. So like when we're looking at these bottom, everyone's probably looking at the bottom per cost per square foot right now. But like when you're looking at this, the school that we're comparing this to was a Harriman design school. There wasn't some of the premium, I guess, programming spaces, you would call it, amenity type spaces that Harriman had in their design. So like there would be a cost premium, right? Like $371 a square foot to really get that apples to apples, so to speak. Like there's no, for instance, there's no gym in this this Harriman report. So like there's going to be, it's going to ebb and flow, like depending on programming and all that. So just keep that in mind.
In case you, I don't know if you said it before, but this removes all the cost escalation that was embedded in the Harriman numbers, which is why it looks much lower cost per square foot, because they assumed an 8% annual sort of inflationary increase.
Yes. So lastly, the other one that really stuck out to me, I guess, was fire suppression, which are fire sprinklers. They had $9 a square foot. No, I don't, like, unless it's like a wet system or a dry system, excuse me, which it wouldn't be in this case. Like, you should be able to buy that from like $3 to $5. I mean, pretty consistently. You know, depending on the site, they're going to probably need a fire pump to keep the water pressure up, et cetera. But I think there's probably some opportunity there to reel that cost in. And let's see, allowances. And then the same thing, I guess, with like mechanical and plumbing. So this can vary dramatically just based on their overall system approach. I think their assumption was gas-fired boilers, which, yeah, I mean, pretty cost effective for the most part, but certainly like they're estimating a narrative and, you know, it's a couple sketches on a napkin, really. So it's very conceptual to try to put this together. So that gets us to total cost per square foot comparisons. As Vanessa said, I thought, so I guess the logic here was they had a bunch of markups, the Harriman report did, and those can vary, I mean, dramatically on whatever you want to include, right, from a percentage standpoint. So for this exercise, we thought it best to look at the true direct cost of construction, which is the scope of work. There's no markups on these numbers right here. We'll get to that in the next slide on how we go about that. So bringing us to this page right now, like I said, we have the direct costs only that are showing here. This is based on when the Harriman estimate was done and this previous school was done was last year. So we escalated them 4.5% direct costs only to get us through Q3 of 2024. Ideally, in a perfect world, this hits the ballot. I don't know if we're going to get there, but for this exercise, we escalate that to November-ish. Dropping down, so what we thought was the best opportunity, just talking about the different programmings that can vary and fluctuate. We just took the average of these as a starting point. That gets us to $423 a square foot. The next one is, and I guess I'll preface this by saying everyone's, you know, we've been talking about cost per square foot on different scenarios and everything. And like, I think we as a committee need to understand like what's in the number, right? Like most people didn't really know what was in that $160 million, right? It was a one lump sum item, but there's soft costs. The school district is carrying their own budget within that number. That has owner contingencies and furniture, other FF&E fixtures, et cetera, that, you know, it's a real cost. So that's in that number. On top of that, how did they approach schedule, right? Schedule is the biggest thing, especially with renovation type solutions. Like we as a subcommittee or as a committee really need to understand if we're going to go the renovation route, we need to understand and define the actual scope of work and then have a phasing and phase it accordingly, right? Because every year you tack on another, whatever, 4 to 6%, 6 to 8%, it just varies. And you take that out multiple years, I mean, the cost will reflect it. So for this exercise, we have the average cost per square foot escalated through Q3 24 at $423 a square foot. So we added 30% wholesale on top of that number. The thought being, we don't know where the potential land would be. I guess we as a subcommittee didn't really know that. We don't know what owner contingencies, what the owner school district budget is. And then just like really other markup items, right? I think if like you're going to have a bond, you're going to have cost of insurance. You're typically going to have, nowadays you will have construction software, project management costs that will be rolled up into your markups by whatever general contractor it gets. So those can vary so much. And then like fees, design fees, et cetera. So the thought here at 30% was, let's assume 8 to 10% goes towards land acquisition. Another 10% is going to be towards owner budget. And then 10% towards any markups, right? Like your design fees, your construction, your general contractor fee, bonding, all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, design contingency, right? Like it's so hard to put a cost together when you don't really have anything there's no specs. There's not really any, there's a couple drawings here and there and some renderings. Like costs can fluctuate so much with so little or missing information. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying 10% land, 10% school district budget, 10% markups. So that gets us to 549 a square foot. And the thought being here, let's say, yay, we have a solution, gets on the ballot this November, we pass it. Then what? Well, we have to design it. And I think that's a whole nother how many meetings that we should probably, go through as a committee of like, what's the project delivery method going to be? Are we going to do design, bid, build? And that's what we did last time, right? So design, bid, build, essentially what happens is an owner will hire a design firm. They will come on, they will do what they did. They did conceptual pricing and it's escalated out. It's, they're trying to cover any risk, right? But inherently there's risk involved because there's no design and they're going to bond on it. There's just different, and that's totally typical for like a municipality. They've been doing that for a long time, but there's definitely other opportunities to deliver the project. Most of the stuff that we do, we deal with like 99% negotiated work. That's just what the private sector does, which really like the owner, the school district would hire a design team, they would hire an architect, and then in this scenario, they would hire a builder, a general contractor. The idea being both of those teams are from the get-go involved and integral. And what happens a lot of times is design, bid, build, they'll just go, here you go. They take it all the way to design, and the people who are actually gonna be building it had no input. They haven't been able to be like, hey, look at this detail. It doesn't make sense. You can never build it like that. There's no checks and balances with their design. And then what typically happens is they'll take it all the way through. Well, they put it out, they competitively bid it, and low subcontractor gets it. Well, great. So then what happens? They have the job, and then any missing items that should have been there or details that don't work and result in changing the drawings, like you just get change orders slapped on and slapped on and slapped on. And like the optics, especially as like a taxpayer, like that's not good. But what I'm trying to say is like the design, bid, build approach is risky in that it can involve cost overruns, like unforeseen cost overruns that really are impossible to mitigate because they have your design is hypothetically 100% issued for construction. It never is, but that's the thought. But taking on a GC, you're doing different. They would do a conceptual estimate at a certain design iterations. Hey, what are we at for budget wise? Oh, fire suppression. We're at, this is crazy. Nope, design this, make these changes and try to target systems and cost reductions to keep that budget in check as you progress through design. Anyways, enough of that right now. So what we did here, this passes in November. We got to get a design team, call it a year, right? It's going to be a year to get documents developed. So we get another 6% on top of that for escalation. And perfect world, we get to December of 2026. Yay, we have a builder. We're gonna start, we onboard them, start digging foundations in April. Well, what we do typically in construction is we'll carry escalation up to the halfway point of construction, just to allow for. By that point, you're out of the ground. Your biggest risk is getting out of the ground. By that time, you're out of the ground. You're weather tight typically, and most of your major items have been procured already, so they're under contract. the risk, I guess, risk goes away, from a cost standpoint once you hit the midway point through construction. So for this scenario, I'm assuming a 2-year build on a new, look at the consolidated school. So we have another 6% on top of that 582, which gets us to $617 a square foot, plus or minus $100 square foot. But no, I think that I honestly, I think that's a good way to look at it. And I think it's a good starting point for what we're talking about, strictly from a new build perspective. So I guess any questions?
Dave, I ran, based on the numbers that some of our team came up with, the $400 per square foot. I wanted to see where that would go, and I put in $400 as per square foot as a hard cost, and put a factor in of 1.3 for soft cost, engineering and so forth. And then I did add another factor of 1.05 first year increase in materials costs. And I follow your number, and I think it's a good number. That I came up with $546 per square foot. You've got 546 per square foot, and but I don't have any additional escalation costs in there.
Yep.
So I guess what I'm asking is, as a team here, do we feel quite comfortable in using somewhere between 546 and 575, or whatever number you would recommend, that we could apply to whatever proposal we have?
Yeah, so I guess the question for anyone online was, can we use, what was it, 5?
I came up with 546. I think.
Yeah.
548 or before escalation.
Before escalation, yeah. So the question is around, I guess, using a range of cost per square foot prior to being escalated. I think my gut is yes and no. I mean, I think it's really, a lot of it's just timing, right? Like what's that?
I'm really looking to your gut feel, because I ended up talking to a colleague of yours today, not even knowing you were here.
Yeah.
Part of our team, but I think whatever your recommendation is, if it's reasonable and takes care of escalation for a starting point, we can apply those numbers to whatever proposal any one of us has come up with. So we're at least comparing apples and apples.
Yeah.
For any one of the proposals.
I mean, I think so. And like, I would err on being higher, right? Just because if we're going to take this to bond again, like I wouldn't want to run into the situation again where, you got a number, it seems pretty high, right? To the average person probably looks at it and see this is pretty expensive. But to like undershoot that potentially, like,
Yeah, I don't know the right number now, but I saw 688 square foot in an army report. So I don't think it needs to be that high, and probably 526 is too low. But based on your input, knowledge, experience, we have a number that we can use to work with.
I mean, I guess I would use 600 to this. I mean, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go lower than 600. And that can change too, right? Because like a lot of these are being driven off of percentages of escalation, and that varies month to month. I think if there's like a consensus on what cost of like some of these markups potentially, maybe that's the conversation, is what do we want to run with 6% escalation, or do we do 8, or do we do 5? Like, because that's going to change, like just a point's going to change that cost per square foot a good amount.
So I think we had started talking about it last time. Leadership team talking about what we're trying to do is come up with a number that everybody's going to use. It's uniform. 2 numbers we're trying to figure out. It sounds like Dave's suggesting a good starting point might be 600. And then 2, the other question becomes, we've seen it is the inflation factor we need to use. I heard you mention 6. I know Harriman was carrying 8.
8, yeah.
So our goal will be to bring kind of a consensus on what's the square footage and what's the inflation rate. So everybody is using it for their models. So I think as specific to this presentation, anybody else have any questions about what was presented?
You're comparing us to a recent Harriman school, which I believe you said is in Mexico.
Yep.
What kind of school are they building? Elementary, is it,
As K through 5.
K through 5?
Yeah, it's a consolidated school.
What kind of site size are they building on?
Ooh, that's a good point, or a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to go back and look at that, but it's something I could find from an acreage perspective.
At some point, if we're building a school, we got
Yep.
to figure out what acreage we need for that school. That's what I was curious.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I certainly can find out though and report back.
Approximately how many square feet is that school, do you know?
I think I was at 100 and I'd say like 170,000.
170,000 feet. So I don't know if anyone in this room has institutional knowledge. 10 years ago, we built Wentworth. And I don't know what the timescale was from when we got the citizens to approve it, actually building it. But, your timescale sounds reasonable, but I don't know if anyone knows what happened with Wentworth, whether that's a similar kind of timescale.
I believe that is pretty typical to what the timescale was for Wentworth. It's like when you think about school construction and you say that it's a 5-year process, we're not talking about a 5-year build, right? Because the first year is doing some of this conceptual work, and then you dig into the specifics and you outline all of that so that by, month 30 or so, like you're in the ground and you're doing the work.
Any other questions? I know that Wentworth looks like Wentworth was 168,000 square feet. Very comparable to what you're building, it sounds like in Mexico. It'll be interesting to compare. I mean, we built that for like 40 million. What are we today?
Yeah. It's been since I would say honestly since like 2018, the costs have just been crazy. Like you used to be able to get a rubber roof for like $18 a square foot, and now it's like upwards of 26, $28 a square foot. So yeah.
I'll let say Craig, I really appreciate your knowledge on it. Does it make sense as we're trying to land on a number to look at recently completed schools that would have all the escalators and everything built in, just as a comparative to say, okay, that gives us confidence?
Yeah. So that's a good question. We have some of the information from the Department of Education. My only hesitancy with that is really trying to understand, we're trying to put together a cost that is a turnkey number for this project, right? In terms of it has all your markups, it's the cost of construction, it's the owner side, right? Understanding their budgets. And I don't know, and maybe that spreadsheet had some of that information, but
it had the construction cost, then it just had a total, but it really wasn't clear sort of what the delta between the
Right.
two, but the total was in the $500 to $600 per square foot range, but that was for schools 2022 and prior. So as everyone knows here, we've experienced significant inflation over the last few years. So when we saw this, it passed a straight face test to us because we're going even further out, and everyone knows costs are going up. So this was kind of close to that high end, that 600 per square foot number.
yeah, and I think just the whole, like, we don't know, someone could have potentially donated 10 acres of land, and it's like there's a few million right there, right? So I think it's probably worth, like, just out of curiosity to look at it, but I don't know if I'd recommend us as a committee like using that approach per se to establish our baseline cost per square foot. Like this one, at least we know, like, we're building this school right now, right? So it's relatively recent costs, around the same-ish time frame as like when Harriman put their estimate together, which is pretty market informed in that time too. So we certainly have the information. I don't know if we want to, we can put it out there if you'd be curious.
Right. If you land on cost of that, it was more like just a confidence builder that, you know, if you took their costs, we added the same escalators to it, is it in the ballpark? You know?
Yep. Yeah.
So I think we've got pretty full agenda tonight. We do have some survey results that we want to kind of share, and I think
But I have one more question. Just
as long as it's on point.
It's on point. If we build a school that's a different size, then we use the same number. So, you know, if we build
Well-
150,000 square foot, when you said, what about if we build 100,000?
Yeah, inherently your cost per square foot would most likely go up, right? Because there's economies of scale that would be applied to this. That being said, like I think it'd be a good starting point.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so
Sorry.
if there's any other questions, maybe just directly email to the co-chairs of the finance committee. They'll answer from the rest of us. With that, I think Nick, you volunteer or volunteer for something to do with make a statement today.
You want to just project?
I'm in.
I have no idea. Go for it. Okay. All right. Right here. You'll see me.
I'm gonna ask you guys to ignore this column real quick. So we got these this afternoon and I, we got them this afternoon. I took a little time, it's the raw data only, final report. They said by the end of this week, they hope to have it cleaned up a little bit for us, but just taking the categories, what I did was I tried to group them and synthesize them kind of in an executive summary type of level. So the first item, first question was, is there urgency around the K through 2 solution? 62% agreed or strongly agreed. Yeah.
Can you just zoom in, like, give that zoom in, Kate?
Sure.
Hey,
Sure.
I don't have that cataract.
All right, so we got about 62% of people saying they agree or they strongly agree that there is an urgency around a K2 solution. About 58%, 59% are agreeing or strongly agree that we need to pursue a middle school building solution. About 55.6% said that they agree or strongly agree should we aim to remove portables. So that should be a good guidepost for us. I also wanted to add, I probably should have started this day. They received over 900 survey responses at the end. So we're well above the viable here for the survey. So it's also good that we have a lot of this solid data. As far as supporting options for K through 2, and this is kind of interesting because we went through a couple of different scenarios in that question. So keeping neighborhood schools regardless of time and expense. 53.7% were either very supportive or somewhat supportive of that statement. Keeping neighborhood schools only if it costs less was just under 50%. We're very supportive or somewhat supportive of that. Supporting the least expensive solution had about 45% of people said that they supported the least expensive solution. Consolidated primary school, if it costs less, about 35% were supportive or very supportive. 45% were not supportive of consolidated primary school, even if it costs less, which I think is kind of eye-opening. Consolidated primary school, where cost is not a factor, again, we're close to 70% when I was not supportive of that statement. So again, at the end of this, this is of course a very executive summary. At the end of these, I think there's some. I started to develop some statements next to it, and I hit that row, so you didn't have to be subject to my mind at work from an hour ago. But at some point, we should coalesce behind agreed upon statements based on the data we're seeing that we're going to take here in this committee and utilize. I'm more than happy to work that out on the leadership team later this evening or next time around.
Send it out to us.
Yeah, raw data can be sent out to the full committee. We got more though for you if you're interested in seeing more. All right. So support for the middle school. So a renovation addition or removing portables and keeping 6 to 8 together, regardless of cost. Basically, that's kind of like, that's the big kahuna, right? But almost 50% of people were very or somewhat supportive of that concept. Renovation and additions, removing portables, sixth grade goes to Wentworth, grade 3 goes to primary schools. Over 50% were supportive of that idea too. The least expensive solution, again, still didn't cross the over, it's about the 45% threshold here for the least expensive solution. But interesting to find out that cost, not necessarily the majority factor here. No changes to the middle school at all. Again, we have about the same percentage as the least expensive, flopped over to say no changes to the middle school. They weren't supportive of that idea at all. So only 22.5% were very supportive or somewhat supportive of no changes to the middle school. So that again, I think that kind of reinforces that in the beginning, does something need to be done at the middle school statement, right?
Yeah.
So Jack, I'm going to ask you to hold your questions till I'm done with the entire presentation of raw data. How important is the SBAC? I hope nobody walks away with hurt feelings. We're ground beef. So 53.1% is not important. I personally don't take this personal. Being in politics, you have to hold that to yourself daily. Don't take it personal. I think what that tells you is this community is willing to take the time to be informed, come to their own conclusions. We're here though to help provide some of that guidance, not just for this community, but for the leadership that's got to move these policies or ideas forward. So don't take it personal. Should grade groupings change? 67.3% are open to changing grade levels within the school systems. Use of eminent domain. 37.2%. I just so you know my methodology is I just highlighted the highest vote getter, right? 37.2% said as a last resort only. 34.3% said no support under any circumstance, and 20.2% said only minimally impactful, and 8.2% said go ahead and take it. So for whatever use it may be, the use of eminent domain in general to help the schools.
3 feet of land. It doesn't have to be somebody's entire house, but your property.
All right, proximity to municipal campus. 51.7% of people said the proximity to municipal campus was not very important to them. Almost 37% said it is very or somewhat important. So again, interesting dynamic there. It sounds like, we probably should be circling somewhere near the municipal campus, but we can't get there. It doesn't sound in the world is what it sounds. How much of a tax increase would you support for the school solution? This is the big one. And this one's interesting because we bracketed it, right? So we're going to have to take some time to kind of, digest this because you can see that we have a pretty interesting split of what people were willing to support. So 20% roughly said they will not support any increase to their taxes to support a school. Conversely, you could always say that 80% of people understand that they're gonna have to pay something to get something. If you look at that though, it looks like most of your support is centered around the $200 number, just based on the 200 to 400 bracket, and then the of course is less than 200. So again, once we get into the interpretation side of it, I have some thoughts on how we can approach the modeling on this. I'll share with the leadership team, and then of course it'll be presented here on some of those suggestions. But just one other note, and there was more questions, a lot more questions, but again, this is executive summary, high level. Other important notes from the survey: reasons for not supporting school building project cost 80%. The second highest vote getter did not like the land deal, that was 63%. The third highest vote getter was preferred neighborhood schools, that was almost 63% as well. More options should have been explored was our fourth highest reason listed at 58.8%. And number 5, the location of the proposed new school, about 50% of people said they didn't like it. If you're wondering why those percentages are all high everywhere, if any of you in here had the opportunity to take it, you can check all that applied to you, right? So we had a good sense of why people got to know the answer. That's it. That's the executive summary of this. We'll send out raw data. We expect the final report probably by the end of the week from the consultants. And of course, we'll work on the leadership team to see how we can maybe digest this into usable information as we go forward with our work. Charlie Peters.
I assume demographic information will come back with the report.
That's all in there. I didn't think to, but if you were asking how many people are over 65 that answered the survey, I believe it was 20% off the top of my head.
It was.
pretty good. Jeff?
Just a quick comment, that most of the categories is pretty much a 2-to-1 decision.
Yeah, they're pretty close. I mean,
In other
you
words-
had that almost the same.
It's like when people said no consolidated school, said they want.
Mhm.
And most of the other factors did that.
Yeah, some interesting information here, right?
Yeah.
Now that we have the numbers and the statistically valid amount of written surveys, are we putting it out online for people to take the survey? Who didn't get the survey?
That was already right.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, that's already.
So are these,
Bill?
is that information included then already?
No, this is statistically valid only.
Okay.
So the other information that's been gathered off of online surveys and stuff, that usually, last time we did the townwide survey, came in about 2 to 3 weeks behind our, this being delivered to us. So that ran separately. It's a lower priority for them to filter those numbers. They know we want this, right? So what we did find in the last townwide survey, though, is that the unofficial survey from online and other sources really closely mirrored our statistically valid survey within 2 to 3 points.
That's good.
All right. You're gonna plug the Zoom back in?
I can, I mean, there's really not a need to do it. Because we're just gonna see ourselves, right?
Spend the next 45 minutes or so. Again, we had sort of 4 sort of proposal solutions that boiled up from the voting exercise last time. They really were around, there was no particular order to how these are organized, but just there was a group that had a lot of votes for a consolidated school. So what we're thinking about doing is having everybody sort of self-organize around whatever solution they have the most passion for, to start doing a lot of the deeper dive into some of the questions that were asked here about what does it look like, what are the configurations, what is the land that they're going to need, or parcel size, those types of things. So again, the four that we came up with is a consolidated school. There was a lot of interest in a core primary care school, and then doing various types of modifications to the other schools to accommodate that. So there'd be a second group. There was a very specific recommendation for grades 2 and 3 to be located on campus, the municipal campus, if possible, and doing some configuration in the other schools. And the last one was a middle school addition to take care of some of the needs. So what we want to kind of have you do is organize into those groups, and maybe the proponents of each one of those groups can kind of stand at different corners of the room, and people can kind of gravitate. Charlie, I think you did consolidated. Oh, I apologize. That's right. Infrastructure. Before we get there, my apologies on infrastructure. There's been a lot of back and forth about what we need for square footage per student, whether it's 140 per square feet or 140 as a factor of 1.4. I think some have talked to the Department of Education officials and others, and they were going to kind of just update us on what they determine is the right numbers for what they consider. I don't know if anybody, Jim, kind of looking at you, whether you know you've been involved.
Last couple of weeks since we got the enrollment numbers, the benchmark numbers, I've been working on. I've been working on some rough numbers. And I finally was able this weekend to work on the benchmark numbers that were presented and the enrollment numbers. The benchmark numbers was the first one I did. I took the enrollment numbers from the enrollment committee, added it through for each fiscal year, starting next year. The 2024, 2025, there's a total of 635 students. Per the 100K per student,
came up at $63,500,000, or per foot cost of $714. The 714 maintained through FY 33. Then I took and run the same numbers on the recommendation that I got from Mr. Scott at DOE. Again, on 24-25, came up to $53,340,000. And that came up to a per student cost of $84,000, which puts us in range of what the benchmark committee found with the Falmouth, Cumberland schools.
It was like the last four, I think, were all in that range.
Yeah.
Like the one we.
So after looking at these numbers, I sent this information to the leadership team with a recommendation that we create a committee to look at the existing schools as they are now. I also did a square foot comparison with what the benchmark and enrollment committee did square footage wise. And it came up less than what Harriman projected by, I think it was 20,000 square feet. That tells me we can do the expansions that's required based upon the two subcommittees on that property. The one thing I couldn't put through my head is what do we do with the students while we're doing the construction? I suggested we create a committee to look at it to see if that's a viable option. I think we owe it to the taxpayers to look at that. One, to eliminate the cost of buying property and the additional cost that it would make on a consolidated school. That's what I got.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to, I think we were looking at a way that each group could decide on the square footage needed by the various solutions. And I thought last time we kind of vectored to something around 150 per square feet for K2 and 160 for, 6 through 8. Is that consistent with? Yeah. But is that something we're comfortable using as a group?
It's a number.
The only thing I'll point out is yesterday I started working on the middle school. The Harriman report used 180 for the middle school. So I don't know, that's quite a difference between.
Currently, the middle school is 186 per square foot, and the other schools are all bouncing around 200. So I think 186 is a good number for working for starters. What's bouncing around? Take 3 neighborhood schools. Just to be clear, you're saying 186 square feet. Correct. Yeah, and I have some handouts, not to say that this is the way we should go, but just to review the numbers that I use, which kind of tie to what we already own, the 186 per square foot, the dollars per square foot are coming close to Dave's. So I think you have enough data relative to any input I have, anybody else has, that if we settle in on a number to be used, 86 or the 400 with the factors in it, bringing up the 549. If we're all using the same numbers, now we can take the different recommendations and compare apples and apples.
Okay, so the leadership committee will talk about it tonight and then try to put something out what everybody can get some common metrics we can use. So I think with that, Steve, thank you for the reminder.
Quick question before we break into the groups you want to choose. The consolidated school effort last week probably got about 24 votes, if I'm not mistaken. It was one of the highest, I know that.
It was hot.
But in light of the raw data that we just got, 63% of the people were definitely against consolidating school.
Yes.
Are we kidding ourselves? Why should we even look at it? Because we're using statistically valid information. Or we're not gonna use it.
Run your analysis. Do your homework before you make a final recommendation.
The thing is, the analysis I saw was a vote that was 2-1 against a consolidated school. We did a survey, came out with basically the same results.
And that can be part of our consideration when we're voting. That,
Why are we not making this recommendation?
yeah, but I don't think it's.
I think
worth-
the answer is we're not making the recommendation because it got beat once, and in the survey, it got beat again.
But one of the reasons it got beat were all the lists below, cost,
Yes, but
location,
of that-
related. It wasn't
How many
only,
people said that one thing?
I think, Jack, you're getting ahead of us. I think you need to let us make the interpretations as a leadership team.
Okay.
Make a recommendation, you should vote on those interpretations.
Okay,
And I just hate to see you just dismiss outright. I'm not kidding. I think we should put it through faith.
okay.
Check. I hear what you're saying. I was actually kind of running through the same thing when I saw the results. And I think it's worth looking at all of the options against the set criteria for which option solve the problem.
I said that too, but now that I've seen the survey, I think, I'm looking to strike 3 now.
I think we should go through the process, we owe it to the taxpayers to turn over every stone we can find and report out. They'll know we look at everything. But one of the councilors asked me to be on this committee, knowing how I am. She asked me to keep an open mind and let the data speak. And if we present the data correctly to the public, give them the proper information, they'll make the right decision.
And the key point in the data would be the survey that came from the statistical valid survey. So the information is there. These people have spoken when we voted at the school. In this particular survey that we just completed, people have spoken again. So I think it's incumbent upon us to go down the road of due diligence based on what came out of the survey. And it appears that the Unified Consolidated School didn't come out of the survey. But we can say, we looked at it and considered it, and the survey said, no.
We go back to the discussion about the cost, which is, costs for new construction or for renovation.
The question was regarding cost of construction. Was that the numbers we were talking about, new construction or cost for renovation?
New construction.
What is new construction?
Is your question about them or the, no, my question? Those are all new construction numbers. Campus renovation is going to be part of this. We don't really have a number for that. And I guess the question is all new construction? We start over the ground. Yeah, I mean, I think what the finance committee was just trying to analyze the report from Harriman and where we were on the prior. What we're trying to do is just come up with some benchmarks for each group to use as you develop your solutions. That, if it's something different than new construction, we're gonna have to find a way to come up with estimates for that. That one number is not gonna be applied to all of us.
So after the, well, under Airman's estimates in the PDF, where they show the drawings of the floor plans of the 4 schools. 4 schools. The
Yeah, so maybe, so Our intent was for to get organized and we would come up with questions, feed them to us, and we will try to give you answers, but it's let's, I think the process is really going to get organized in your groups and start talking about what those solutions are. And then we can go from there.
I think we could all. We need to.
I think it's important because there are some renovation solutions on the board, like those groups should define what like the priorities are, like the safety upgrades. Okay, let's do a bunch of mechanical and electrical upgrades too, make it more efficient, insulation, we look at the envelope, that type of stuff. More than just repeat walls and moving rings around like that. So I think we can arrive at and our cost, we just need to know what cost.
So it's like you got the numbers from Harriman on with their scope.
For the renovation, no, we did not. I'm assuming
They were $210 million.
We got consolidated, at least getting that provision. So Dave, I think the maker you're saying is as the group sort of evolved and developed what those renovations may look like, there may be a way we can scope that and we can go back to the finance committee to see if.
That's in the Harriman drawing.
Well, but that, what the groups may come up with may not, but. Well, let's, I mean, what we're trying to do is get organized in the groups.
I understand it.
Okay.
And went through the process when it was adding on classrooms to the 3 schools. And then renovated the existing school when they were not classrooms, they were other rooms, fields, and they labeled them color coded. Special ed was green and took up most of this area. In that area of the existing school compared to the square footage of the addition, the additions were all more than the original square footage of the school. At $210 million.
Yeah.
That's why it went out for a unified school at 130 million.
So again, we're putting kind of the Harriman report behind the scenes.
Well, no, it's good information.
It's good information, but I think that rather than hash it out at this level, what we're trying to do is for the groups then to identify their solutions.
The information that's good is they went through a process and did something.
Yeah, understood, but let's, I mean, what we're trying to do is get to the process of, let's see if we can organize around the things that were advanced as solutions that this group wanted to see explored.
Yeah.
And bring your knowledge to that group, that whatever you choose to participate in. And then develop, you're gonna have to work with everybody else in that group to merge into a solution. And then as that develops, we can figure out what else you might need for resources like cost or other things and move from there. So I think with that, if there's an interest, let's get organized into the groups and start kind of identifying what the solutions are gonna look like.
A subgroup.
And again, they're gonna be.
What's that?
So I think consolidated will be over here, with Charlie, okay. The middle school on the campus, municipal campus will be with Sue in the back right corner. Then, the 4th primary school, which is probably the biggest group, probably in that back corner. And then this corner will be the middle school. That's fine.
That's always one time.
Well, right there. What's that? All right, Carol, come over here.
We're gonna mark on this. The solution is like this.
Similar.
Yeah.
They'll still actually be able to have this. Yeah. You're on the Google Drive. I think you were trying to put something What's wrong? Why they don't. And I realized I checked all the boxes. Why I voted no. Okay, this is wrong. And I started looking at each time where you run. People had a 30%. Almost every stuff. Or the middle school. The big house. The big cameras. I think I just. I think we can ask. That's why I said that. Yeah, it's different though. Hopefully our communication. That's our. All right, Carol. Do it. You are in charge, my friend. I'm sitting here and I want to educate. I know I'm always good to do. Put it in time. I'm ready. Come on, Mike. Right there. It's been done, right? I got something. That's not. It's like lumber, rock. I wasn't clear what you said. I read it. I mean, all we're trying to do is, there was a whole.
Convince yourself.
That may be. That could be one of those.
Interesting. They can.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we have here from an engineer, whether it's structural. Can do Yes.
Nothing's off the table.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, convince one of them.
Nobody was interested in my.
Oh, no, that wasn't really.
Yeah.
Well, or leave available.
So, I mean, I don't.
I mean, as an option. That would be the percent or people.
Out of my neighborhood. The water system. Yeah, so. Water. If so. Either way, even if it's not.
You know what I mean?
Even though we're it's not.
Oh, that's. Right. You know, these numbers make. Right. But I see.
Well,
April, are you still online?
Like, so.
See, I can hear you. April, I'm gonna call you. I'm gonna just call you.
Down the other way, he said, this is my state. So, I would find out if you want to drive over and walk on the way. Those days.
But then there was that.
And now you're bringing up all those.
So that's where Diane might be only to close all the time in March.
see, you know, like, there's a story of I'm sure it was also- Actually, I think you could probably do a little Yeah, I think that's a good one. I know I just.
Your plans. Does it take into account? Cafeteria, put it all.
Just to put your life studies here, pretty much what. That means if they're on that, and haven't been moved into their next level, it means that it's not stating that I have. No, it didn't. Community support. Community support. So right now, and because you never think about the idea of.
But that's a little
So it was like, I don't know how to interpret that's my best interpretation statement, right? And I want this one over here, saying one way, you know, fourth primary school. I don't want them coming out with there is some expansions that they're using to drive their solution.
I don't think we can do this.
So maybe,
But this, I think we should have.
The other thing they brought up. I was.
So create more valuable services. So we parking lots and we can grass. I don't know. How many?
Whereas like enrollment numbers.
That's why we built it. That all window section.
These things are. Like a
Well,
utility.
the side of so.
Yeah. My only and this was brought on. Thank you for. Oh, well, I was like, to be honest, I didn't expect that at all. And I was like, and or at least whatever you want to not use it. And I would have put all three dots on it. And I was like, it's just something that's needed, it's the rubric. We did want to then talk about it today and then send it out. Talk about that day. That's like the cafeteria.
I agree. From a debates you have a problem as far as your question. Like it.
Yeah. But it's like some of them are used to it. We might just require.
Like if they're. But.
No, that's good.
That seems like, that seems to be tough. Yeah. And I think that's actually a big one. I think there's potentially adding this additional going out. And to me, the county is like, bigger than came out so strong and then they fell apart.
But I just.
They call out.
Maybe we should discuss it. Very. Like, yes, you're gonna have the equity stuff. And yeah, like, those things are gonna be. And then we have one mutual separation and body and very much obviously works by all so you know, if this is just matter, the one person would be like, you know, we agreed upon these things, and this one fills 80%. This one, let's just do that. Because, yeah, wait, like you could cover 60 milligrams and not huge, like. Yeah, that's what Brian Paul's. You like that. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and then the cost. Want me to use my.
Yeah, there you go.
No.
All right, everyone, we can do that.
So yeah, it tells for all of them.
All right, let's get everybody together. All right, everyone. Trying to get you out of here. That's all. So thank you. It sounds like you guys have started some good conversation. There've been some feedback. What we're gonna do, the leadership group, we are gonna convene, and prior to next meeting, we're gonna get out a bunch of recommended assumptions for you guys to think about, things like square footage and some of the other things we've talked about. Come prepared. We'll get it out to you during the week. Come prepared next Monday night to vote on things that we have consensus on. And that will give you sort of the yardsticks to evaluate the different solutions you're coming up with. So with that, more to come. We'll let you know. We're gonna meet with the smaller leadership group tonight. We'll probably reconvene during the week. So with that, thanks for everybody coming. Anybody else have any closing comments or anything? No, with that, then motion to adjourn. I make the motion.
Second,
Okay, thank you. Thanks. everyone.
Close to it. It's like only, 20 seconds.
Yeah, he does. Usually comes to my meeting.
I like the idea because you feel like they need
I'll pick you up. Oh, I got 2 daughters.
Because look, I might be 20 years old. Look at this, have no plans to ever have kids. I want to change some. I'm just like, I think you don't capture that to make it like. I think that it's totally down for it. So we're doing a survey as much as children in the system or coming into the system.
be fair, there is a lot of people not having kids, you know, or.
And their opinion and their votes and their time management matters just as much as that's the biggest. You're trying to find a solution. When I watched this survey. But when everyone has a solution to solve the problem, by the time you renovate 4 schools, we don't even know the enrollment, we haven't checked the enrollment data past 10 years, it's a 12-year build cycle. So what are we building? Oh, that's how we look. Oh. It's not gonna be. I think I'm getting. They want to.
Is this?
Yeah.
Right, so I know, trying to get to the hockey game tonight. That 2 minutes ago, okay. So there's. Yeah, thanks. Thanks. No, cut me off, yeah. Up with some, pretty much, I think what you have on here is what we captured tonight. The only, I mean, I think they vectored to 600 square foot. As a reasonable start, inflation is 6%, reasonable. So that, then the only question I had for Charlie, the 150 and 160, did that come from the prior conversation?
That came from, Jim's spreadsheet. I just pulled that off of the spreadsheet. So I was just trying to capture what the infrastructure team did, what the finances did. So that's all that was.
So thought is maybe if everybody, and then your group talked about not adopting the benchmark recommendations.
Yeah, just pretty much, I was kind of grab people at different moments, but we had kind of expressed concern that we did these presentations in like benchmarking and such, but we never actually adopted them the way we formally adopted enrollment. So in making this rubric, we really haven't as a committee agreed upon them. So if that was necessary before making a rubric, to then turn around and say you need to meet these things, but technically the committee hasn't voted upon them in the same manner.
So it seems like, is it reasonable to build on this rubric, put on the rubric recommendations from benchmarking, circulate it to all of us if we have comments, and then try to get it out so folks can come next week to confirm that those are what we're going to use?
Most of those would be part of it, wouldn't it? Because they're actually about the programming, the class sizes, gym sizes, right? That those recommendations would be part of it. So that makes sense.
I guess you could do it that way. If it's adopted as a rubric, it's adopted as a requirement. And then you kind of you just kind of consolidate the timing to reserve more time for group work. So if it's adopted on the rubric, so it's just kind of how you frame it. Yeah. You adopt the recommendations versus adopt the rubric. So yeah, it's probably more expedient, save time for people to work through in their group way to do it that way.
So maybe I can just build off the draft Charlie did. Anybody else, we talked about doing some work by email, just circulate it around. Anybody can make any edits, additions to it before we get it out. That makes sense. All right. And then Nick had a suggestion on the survey, whether we wanted to write as a leadership team, just general observations. Is that the way to describe it, or interpretation
of the results that we could all use? I sent it around.
Who wrote the ones that are in there?
I did. Yeah. I just wanted to, literally, we got this afternoon and an hour and a half before this meeting started, I was sitting over at town hall, just being like, okay, this is how I read this.
And I couldn't open it on my screen, the whole thing at once, so I'm going this.
So I think we have format. All of us can
Drop
edit
it
it
up, yeah, it's just Excel.
Mhm.
I don't know if somebody wants to drop it, but, or how they want to handle that, but it's just you made a good suggestion earlier that we should probably make sure we have vendors final report to us before we start interpreting.
Yeah.
Like I said, she came in this afternoon.
Oh, I know, yeah. But I thought you wanted to get it out for next week.
It would have been nice, but knowing that we're not gonna get to find the vendor's final report till the end of this week possibly, we probably should sit.
And that's the written reports, is it gonna be required that he come to a council meeting and give a verbal report?
So last time they were.
Right.
Did a final presentation to the council. Only, all it was a town-wide survey. This one, I don't know, if we should workshop with the board of education. Because it's
Mhm.
joint.
So was that a kind of a school survey as opposed to a town survey? Is that?
We did it jointly. Right, like, we developed it in a joint fashion,
Yeah.
so we should continue that.
Yeah, so we would have to schedule a workshop to get that. You know, honestly, he pretties it out, he puts it in a nice format, he sits there and answers any questions that we may have. But for our purposes, I think we can make some loose interpretations on these numbers.
Any chance, whenever he comes for you guys, I mean, he'll be soon, right? He's next couple
Is it a
weeks.
public meeting when he comes?
Mhm.
It's usually a workshop. So
Yeah,
So
it's
anybody
public.
could come listen or watch.
Invite and open up anybody here that's interested.
I mean, we could try to do it on a Monday night and see if the whole board's involved tonight. Do the first half of SBC meeting.
I mean, I would not be opposed to that.
It's more of us than them.
Probably not.
In terms of getting another date.
Sooner the better.
Yeah, that's the thing. So we'd have to find out from him when he's available. Hey,
It'd have to be in the next week, it'd have to either be next Monday.
it'd probably be a minimum 2 weeks from tonight. Minimum.
Did he zoom in or did he come in person?
That makes it a little bit easier.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
a lot more flexibility.
Yeah.
I mean, that works out.
We need to make sure that's working.
Can he zoom in to just this group next Monday night? He or she, I don't know.
I don't know, honestly. Yeah, I think that'd be really quick.
And
Also, you know, the board and council. Have that data. Are you asking to do that instead or in addition to?
because this group needs it before, I mean,
Yeah.
the town council was interested, but this group needs it before to inform their work. Or they're gonna make,
What I would say is that I'm leaning towards seeing if he quickly do it joint.
Mm.
With the school board.
Yeah.
And the council on a Monday.
and just to be clear, you're okay distributing the survey information you shared tonight?
Yeah, I mean, it's my. All I have is his printout from today, and then I just put it in an Excel sheet to try to like synthesize it. This is how you.
But do
All right, oh,
do we
can
share your interpretation or do we share his raw data?
Raw data would be the better way to go.
Yeah, I would delete your column.
Because the thing is, you know, you gotta agree, strongly agree and agree. Well, I did it, and I just grouped them.
Yeah, we can,
You know, and then I put it in an Excel sheet, because that's not here, you know.
right, so I was wondering,
Right.
when you said we were gonna
Doing that.
distribute it, we made a commitment to distribute it.
I
The
would-
raw data is that,
I would
Yes.
distribute the raw.
Broad, yeah, for sure.
I agree.
Yeah,
But
let
that's okay,
everyone
it's not
come to their
good.
own conclusion. So, one of the people came and asked me to ask you, the group tonight, if shouldn't we be a little bit talking about what land is available if we're talking about another school? And I said, well, Tom said it's kind of none of our business, but I said, I will bring that up. She said, well, would we be wasting our time if so?
I think we
Consider
need to know
yourself
how many
asked.
acres. I went through the search, phase 2 would be part of the search.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have so much that we've taken on that I would.
I can at least tell them. So just keep, they're talking about square footage to continue down that road.
What's the parcel size?
Well, yeah, what we need for a parcel, what.
Right, because they're looking at age, playground, all that.
The parcel, how much acreage
Right.
we need for the square
And they
footage?
think there's some state criteria, so they're gonna look that up too.
There is.
What, like how many students?
Well,
The size of a playground, what type of playground equipment you have, if you have to offer a field or not, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Parking, Board of Education stuff.
No, that would be like, on the DOE, so like the main DOE.
There's also like
You're gonna get that.
stuff that we don't necessarily always have, there has to be access around the back. And so it all takes a plan. What we learned
Fire stuff.
during the last one was that even a much smaller schools, like almost the same amount of acreage, it's like a 6-acre difference.
Well, I think what the average person really focuses on when they think about a school build, right, is the actual building and then what do you need for parking? And the reality is there are a lot more factors, right? So for example, like you have to think about where are the retention ponds that you're building, because you've got to have a way to draw the water away from the building. And depending on what your parcel of land looks like, right, and how much water is there naturally, then the size of that shifts and changes, and the size of your school determines that. So there's a lot to consider as you think about the size of a piece of property, especially in this town where we know that basically everything is wet, right? Like if we were living up on a mountain somewhere in a school district, we would probably have a different conversation, right?
We do that. No, there was something that was brought last meeting that was completely off my radar that I think is worth at least calling to people's attention, but apparently schools require town septic and water. And the Springbrook, I know the Springbrook was thrown out as an area of interest. Springbrook area does not have town water or sewer.
So you don't have to be on town water and sewage. Obviously, that is a better situation to be in than to have a well. But like if we think about many rural communities in the state of Maine, like I think about other schools that I have led as a building leader that had no other choice but to be on a well and to have septic. But there's just a whole nother host of issues, right? And challenges that get created. Right. So I just wanted to make sure that I was giving you accurate information, right? So it's not, it has to be within city limits and access to those utilities. It is a much more optimum situation, both in the short term and in the long term, to be able to do that,
So the
right? Because there's
other
different
side-
cost
So
factors.
the other side of the turnpike is not out.
Correct.
See, when I was on the school board, that was out.
Well,
Couldn't go
I
south.
mean, it's
Because of
not
the
out
sewer
if
water.
you want to have a well and
Right, but I was given to understand it was required. Back then, Now, that's a long time.
yeah, I
ago,
mean, I think it is the most desirable.
And it wasn't connected to the internet and all this stuff. that-
Mhm.
Broad term.
You do. You
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's so much.
You'd have to walk.
Does a school need to be on the state road?
I don't know the answer to that.
There's one.
Because that's
So-
a huge restriction. Right? The fact that we can only look on this side of 95, when the land that's truly available is on the other side where there's no infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, it can be discussed as part of the option as long as we have the right costing.
Yeah, and again, when we had looked at previous options before the first referendum, we were trying to do apples to apples, right? So it was like build a school that has public water and public sewer. And so when we looked at options that were across the turnpike, right, and the need to have to go tunnel underneath that, et cetera, that was all baked into the formula because we were trying to compare apples to apples, right? So building a school with access to all of the same public utilities, and what would the cost, what would that look like across those options?
I do think
It
it's,
took them 3 years to run a pipe 2 miles down 114, so.
I do.
Much hope that they'll solve this
Yes.
problem anytime
The
soon.
wheels of progress do turn slow.
I'm not for it.
You've been different proposals.
No, I was-
Oh, yeah.
I was just curious if there's
Mhm.
any future plans to move, to put, because I keep going back to the solutions that seem to be getting traction are 12 to 15-year solutions. So in 12 to 15 years, a new council and a new voter base might go, oh, we need public utilities out there. And then we've missed an opportunity to put a school where there's gonna be, where there's cheap land today, right? Like,
I think it's just one of, like, I don't know how to do it, quote unquote, but like, I think we have to have like another set of eyes on some of these proposals, because like, I never would have known about this type of thing, and a whole proposal could have been built, so I don't know if we need to slide it, all recommendations that halfway through the process or something need to be slid to our town council reps and our school board reps and our school resources and
Yeah.
everything, just to find code and be like, hey, by the way, you haven't considered the fact that X, Y, and Z needs to be considered, and they still have some of that time to consider it. And just given that opportunity to really truly vet something, because I think surprises are gonna come up, but if we can avoid those surprises using our resources that were like made available to us, I think it's kind of the best
Yeah.
path forward.
I think that's a great idea. And I think kind of related to that is how do we within this room, now that these 4 groups are kind of getting to work on, these ideas, how do we create a sounding board for one another, right? So is it that, like I heard you talking earlier in the meeting just now about like, you need to make sure your proposal hits these criteria, right? And so then do we say, okay, create a, 1-pager chart that can go up that says, okay, you already knew what the proposal was and it meets the classroom need because it creates X number of classrooms. It meets the cafeteria gym need because it does this. And you go down through all those things. And then we kind of almost do like a gallery walk, right? And everybody has sticky notes and we could have, like another chart next to it, like pros and cons or questions that you have, and just have people put those up, because sometimes that can be a faster way to collect feedback from people than having, one large discussion about that.
Yeah, because that group in the corner, none of them are advocating a separate gym and cafeteria. So, in terms of what they're talking about.
Right,
for
and
alternatives.
That's what I found so interesting about the options that were presented for all of the other, the 4th school is they don't address the deficiencies the principals said they have.
Well, they just thought there had to be trade-offs, because the last statement before we left is that he's not gonna vote for anything that's more than estimated 100 million. It's gotta be that or less. So he wants to build to budget, like we might do our own kitchen and say, this is our budget. We can't get A plus cabinets. We gotta get B cabinets,
Right.
And so I think that's what he's saying. Because there was.
Interesting concept, because like, I keep hearing 100 million. But does anyone actually know what the impact is?
Right, that's the more important piece is.
Well,
what is the
they
impact
talked
of this?
about that too, because he talked about,
Sorry, who's he in this?
I don't know his name.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure where we were.
One of
going
the
with
members of our
It was-
committee.
that. It was a member committee.
It was the
member.
group
Okay.
in that point.
Oh, okay.
And that's okay. We don't need to name them,
Yeah.
right?
Arbitrary numbers to me. We don't, I mean, it seems to me that the bigger concern to people is that their day-to-day, their month-to-month tax impact
Mhm.
versus some number from the sky.
But wait till the end of May when they see it. Some are gonna be dead.
70% of people are gonna have more than a 10% tax.
Well, right.
So for the adoption of the budget.
well, and that's kind of where I was saying when we started this, was knowing that that's coming. And cost is clearly the most important issue that's why I'm saying I'm not convinced at this point that the voter will pass in.
I hope they do. I hope we come up with something they can vote on, but.
This will be a tough year. I
Rate,
think.
percent tax increase, and then we try to go present this to them right on the heels of that. It's gonna be a tough sell.
In the spirit of the Bruins.
Still 0-0.
So, questions on this?
That's what's underneath this. Now I get it.
Or an email, because Harriman actually had, Vanessa pulled it up from our group, because they had actually a pretty nice metric, a matrix that you kind of laid out the deficiencies resolved or not, and the different options.
Well, and what I was talking with this particular group about, because they invited me to sit down and listen, since I had missed that last week, was, talking a little bit about the methodology that we had used for the former project, which was, that process of going through space allocation needs for the building, so that, yes, number one, you start with like, how many classrooms are we going to need? How many grades are we going to have? But then you start picking that apart to, okay, so if this school has 40 classrooms, that means I need to be able to schedule in the course of the week 40 art classes. How many classrooms do I need for art if I have to schedule in 40 classes? If kids get PE twice a week for 30 minutes, how much PE space do I need so that 40 classes can go to gym class twice a week? And we did that, right? Going through the entire kind of schedule of what students have as part of their program. And that is in part what helped us get to the numbers that we needed.
If that's all in here.
Yeah,
I thought so.
right. But it's that level of detail that we don't want to miss,
Right.
right?
So
So that you can't make it so tight that that gym teacher is not getting break or not getting, like, they can't be that tight. So having to also take into account those things.
Well, there's passing time, there's all kinds
Right.
of things that have to
What I
fit
was
into
gonna
that
suggest
day.
is
Yeah.
take that Harriman, make sure that it matches what our benchmarking subcommittees and our enrollment subcommittee, alter some of the numbers and
Right.
some of the assumptions that we've made here. But basically use that format
Right.
and that to get us to, rather than just a Word document with a list, that we actually have something that we can.
It'll
fill
be
in.
easier to compare if
Right.
you line them up.
Right.
It's,
Is that,
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah.
If you give me probably by tomorrow night after, I'll work on it after work and send it over, because it's a spreadsheet. It's easy to recreate.
Yeah.
And then we can chew on that. And then I don't know if we're meeting, if you want to meet
Yeah,
again.
and I can take a look at it for you if that's helpful, just to help, the group think about the types of spaces that people may or may not be aware of.
Find what a neighborhood school is. Is there a definition? Like, I was surprised that the survey said neighborhood school, because I don't know what that is.
Are you the one that said there is no neighborhood school because of?
I'm just saying, I just don't.
Corners is not in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
All the survey refers to
Somebody-
neighborhood schools. People are very, they love the neighborhood schools, right? 60% said they want a neighborhood school no matter what.
But they're all over on this side of the town.
But even then, nobody walks to Eight Corners. You cannot walk to Eight Corners.
It would not be safe.
It would not be safe.
Last year, when we did a survey, when we
All those
asked
people
principals
that
about how many students walked at all 3 K2 schools, that number was 24
24 students.
out of
Well,
600.
which is why we can't make decisions based on walking.
What about
we can
right
make
about
decisions
did that?
If
Was that
you ask me.
That was
when I
included.
hear
because I can.
from
So it was
community
walking
members,
or riding.
Whether or not I align with this, not a topic, but
Kids right by the side.
they
They're a
consider
little
those
older,
communities,
too,
like they
right?
have
Oh,
these
yeah,
little
okay.
communities.
I
like
wouldn't
this.
let
I mean,
my K
whether
through
it's a
two run by.
romantic idea or not, I mean, it's still very present.
They
So
want a
they're-
small school.
Small school.
Well,
But what's
or
it?
not, a community school where they feel like they're part of a little community.
Yeah.
But I think that is balanced. I mean, I spent a lot of time at kids' birthday parties and soccer fields and everything else, listening, people are willing to talk about the way that they felt. And
I think
that's what it is like, it's not that they can, some people are like, well, I can walk. Well, that you're 5 people, okay, like, let's.
They want to feel like they're going to a space where it's welcoming and that people know them
It's
and know
not
their
for
kid.
you, Which it sounds like, though, like,
Right?
even like Wentworth, it's kind of a school in a school concept. That's Wentworth, and like, I've never heard anyone.
Yeah,
people feel like they're-
Question is that if 60% of people said they want a neighborhood schools, I just want to know what neighborhood schools means. What does that term?
Well, it might mean something different to every person who filled out the survey because we didn't define it.
But not a giant
So.
school. They don't want
so
a
that's
giant.
my point.
Mhm.
What's a giant school? Physically, the building itself is a large school, and you're ignoring the fact that like within that school, there is a little pod and a little pod and a little pod that the children are only
Yeah.
those exposure, which means those parents are exposed to that small community within a physically large imprint, or sure, we don't want
But
a
they-
physically large building and
The middle
kids running
school-
all
But
over
they still-
middle school
they
have
still
red
go to
wings,
some-
blue wings, right? It's the
Yeah,
same concept.
art.
with
Yeah.
the same people that they're in that little area.
Yeah, with their little
But they-
communities.
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
great question. The problem is about the way
It's
made people
okay.
answer the question.
You're not gonna convince me.
Well,
When I saw
mean,
it Wentworth.
that's
it was
just part
So
of
is
it.
it statistically relevant then? If nobody knows what it is?
Well,
Like, is that statistically?
Yes,
What it is.
So it's
certainly
around
consolidated.
yes.
When I,
I mean,
when I
that's,
saw it,
but that's
I
the
just
answer we
found
got.
it.
Right, that's my,
Right.
but I guess like, if we're trying to.
You had to go everywhere versus the students were on a team,
Neighborhood school is.
right?
Well, sometimes
If
when
it's-
I
if
had to
the
walk.
answer is we just don't want to consolidate the school. Okay, then let's not look at
They're not
consolidated
paid
school. I agree with Jim.
Mhm.
I found it to be.
But if we're gonna say we want a solution that is
Hot school.
neighborhoods, neighborhood schools, I think we've got to define what neighborhood schools is, because otherwise we're not gonna solve that
When
problem.
I
So,
was substituted in
I mean,
band for 3
one of the
days
things
in a row.
that's come from this is, it
There
sounds
was a
like we're gonna
huge
have
band,
one
and there was never
recommendation
more
that's like,
than,
please correct
and
me
I
if
have
I'm
different
wrong,
kids
it's
every
so
day,
hard to
so
hear.
there
Get
was
one,
never more than
2,
12,
3,
13 kids. Nobody used the practice
3,
rooms.
4,
And
5,
then
6,
the room next door,
7,
which
8.
was a music room,
Is
was
that-
empty. Every
Do you,
time I was
if
there,
people
I'm
were to
thinking,
be
what the hell,
like,
what is
okay,
this?
here's the
Mm.
option. Your kid's gonna transition this
Because there
many
are
times,
rooms
even your
that
little kid,
are not
and so your little kid is gonna
utilized.
get to be known for 2 years and then another 2 years and then, you know, like.
Yes, if they had a marching
When
band,
they
maybe.
really look at that, we should, if that goes out as a straw poll, like, that is going to be a consideration, but that doesn't, to me, is not a community school. That's like a bump, a bump, a bump, a bump. I would be uncomfortable with that personally.
Especially put it on this campus, right?
Well, and then we have. But, I mean, I'm just saying, there's all these little pieces that I would like this group to consider what the community would think about or feel about that for the impact to kids.
I think such a new idea like that, it would need to be better because like, you know, I'm not necessarily against the concept of having
Yeah.
that like 2, 3 but I hadn't thought of like, wow, that's a lot of transitions for a little kid. And when I brought it to my little mom friends, we were just chatting while we were hanging out and they asked me how this committee was going and I was like, wow, a really new idea was put forward. Thought it was really interesting. K1, 2, 3, etc. And all of the moms went, that's so many transitions for my kids. And that was the immediate response with, I hadn't even considered
Yeah.
that. And I was like,
That
you know what? That's true. I'm having a hard time getting my daughter to be willing to even go to Blue Point in the fall. Never mind, here's Blue Point for 2 years and a new school and a new school and kind of hopping like a little frog. So I think an idea that new, like I think it's got its absolute benefits.
Yeah.
But I think it would need to be vetted before it, could be like right on a ballot. And go.
Most places have 3 schools.
Yeah.
Elementary, middle school, and high school. Those are the transitions that most kids make
So we
outside the
already
main.
have an intermediary.
And we already have an extra
Or,
transition.
Yeah.
4 phases, yeah.
4 phases.
I don't know how that, we listened to a long time ago that there was it was sort of it was meeting 2 purposes. They were running a room at the schools and there were some ideas around grade groupings, which is how we arrived here. And now we're kind of stuck with it.
A couple of them over. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Bruins are going to play.
Can't talk about the score.
It's only game 1.
So I think you made. Once we get this boiled down to maybe the 4 options, if that's what it comes out, is I think what Cape Elizabeth did is they actually kind of tried it with the community and said, yeah, here are 4 options. Which one of these would you force rank or something? I don't know if we have time to do that, but that may get to some of the questions. Problem is worrying about that survey information. You know, if we said this is a community-driven initiative, I mean, I think we need to listen to.
That
what
survey
is in
said our opinion didn't matter to most of them.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, right.
I would just say this, remember, the survey was meant to supplement our efforts, right? How is what we're producing here aligned with what community sentiment is? Now, if you're gonna deviate from community sentiment, you better have a really, really good reason. You should be able to explain it to the community. Because if, that would be my recommendation, which is.
Well,
Exactly what I
Their
And I think-
attitude will be, why did you ask us?
And I think
It's
it,
spoken.
and I think it depends on what questions you're looking at the community survey, right? Because if they answer, if certain questions are answered in, you know, in the way that they are, and then you look at the money question and it says, you know, I don't want more than a $200 tax increase. Which of the questions are you looking at on the survey?
Exactly. And
That's why it's meant to be a supplemental guide. Like if you can't
Right.
actually produce a fourth school solution that's gonna fall in that $200 to $400 range and it ends up being like an $800 range, you know you're gonna have a miss. So, okay, what would be a
Well,
solution?
The goal is not to get this on the November ballot, is it?
No.
No,
But what's the rush?
Well, we,
Because we still have to engage someone for the design work
Yeah.
before we can go to referendum.
I see.
Yes, can we, so I think Charlie suggested kind of a checklist I'll share with everybody. We can get something out. Next week, the agenda will be, we'll try to get them to approve the checklist, right? You're gonna check for the following Monday, whether the survey information, but the rest of the next week's agenda is just them working groups. Anything else we need to cover?
Just to clarify, I think it's two different things, right? So one is assumptions, right? We're gonna adopt assumptions.
Yeah.
And then a checklist for criteria of how we're going to evaluate the options.
And I think this group agrees, I mean, the assumptions were 6% inflation, 600 a square foot for new construction. I mean, just so you've articulated here, 150 and 160 square feet.
Okay.
What else do we need?
They decided on 6% today? Because it was eight was what I put in there from Harriman, but.
I think that they landed on 6%, right? Like,
Yeah,
like-
When I walked in, he said 6 to 8, and I didn't hear him.
Dave
but-
said 6, Harriman had used 8, so he said I'd be comfortable using 6 to 8.
And he used 6 in his calculation.
Well, what he said was, and what you said was like, that was done when things were a little more volatile. As long as we pick a number.
Yeah, if everybody uses the same
For
number.
the comparison of the
Use
four
the same
projects, we
number.
just have to use the same,
Prepay.
right? And then the accuracy of those numbers, well, you know,
The
none of
investor-
us are, you know, are professionals in that area.
and
right.
again, some of the detail we're worried about now is gonna be in phase 2. All we're trying to advance is.
Right.
What are the concepts that need a deeper dive?
What's phase 2?
Phase 2 is gonna be
I
valid.
mean, there's a lot of passion for the work, right?
I know.
Validate phase 1.
I have a feeling we'll see a lot of familiar faces in phase 2.
Right.
All right, so with that, and what's the score?
Yep,
Oh, still? Good.
Oh, nothing's happened.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
All right, so I don't